What are some negatives for being quite smart? Story 1. You realize how stupid most people are. You understand how little you know and how smart you are not. Answer. Stupid people think they are smart and can do no wrong. While smart people are always hard on themselves, the main contributing factor is the smart person's skepticism about their own intelligence, and always being on guard is what keeps them sharp. A smart person will legit ask themselves, have I been the real idiot all along? Stupid people almost never ask themselves that question, because they're always so sure of themselves. They're rushing into problems without thinking it through, under the illusion of confusing confidence with stupidity. On the flip side, however, and this is insanely important, the stupid person will always accomplish more in life because they still try no matter what, even if their confidence is unfounded. While smart people tend to get so absorbed in things to the point that it intimidates them out of taking any action at all, and they end up being trapped in the paralysis of analysis as they wait for the perfect time that never comes. Flawed actions being taken are always more valuable than the most perfect of ideas that never moves beyond the planning stage. So in life, it's tempting to say that the smart people always come out on top in the end, but that's often not the case, not even close. Story 2. You can often see that a situation is going to end badly, but if you express it, people dismiss you for being negative or whatever. You spend a lot of time watching slow train wrecks play out without being able to do anything about it, without upsetting people. I saw a meme today that the final stage of a smart person's life is just learning to pretend they know nothing to not have to deal with other people's drama. LOL. Answer. Literally how I've lived for the previous 3 years, a little under a year after I'd gotten sober. As far as anyone outside my most intimate circle is aware, which is a scant 4 people, I'm a dumb, stupid, incompetent meanie who knows very little and is capable of even less. Ever since I've started sandbagging, my life is almost completely lacking in drama or stupid bullshit. Can you help me with this computer thing? Sorry, I don't know how to do that. Can you add this up for me? My apologies, I'm awful at math. Have you seen this show? I don't even own a TV. No one, I actually see in person outside of that circle gets anything but the bare minimum of NPC-ish responses from me if I can help it, and it makes me so happy. Story 3. Realizing that the vast majority of people are not only ignorant, they're genuinely not open to most type sources of truth. They like the little boxes that have been erected for them and are quite happy to stay within the bounds. Worst part is that they're often happier for it. Story 4. It's harder for them to be happier. Illogical things happen all the time, and that pisses them off. Also, smart people feel that they have a responsibility to improve society in some way. But when society is being dumb, which is often, it can be frustrating. Answer. Most people are okay with not knowing or accepting whatever superficial explanation they get. I am obsessed with knowing and getting to the crux or truth of problems. Often, I am disappointed by the answers and feel like I have to keep my opinions to myself. I don't understand why others don't get it, and it makes me very pessimistic. I've heard that having realistic expectations, not constantly optimistic and hopeful, is a symptom of depression. There's some truth to that. Story 5. I'm not going to be arrogant and say I'm quite smart, but I appear to be more aware and comfortable with my ignorance than others. It's extremely frightening to see tons of people dismiss easily obtainable information because they automatically think they know better. Story 6. As others have said, you realize how little you actually know. Plus, I have found that having a slightly better understanding of how the world works and how hard, uncaring, and unfair it is can easily lead to depression. Story 7. You tend to see the world as a system to analyze rather than an experience to feel. You dissect everything, people, emotions, even joy, until it starts to lose its magic. And that kind of overthinking can make you feel incredibly isolated, even when you're surrounded by others. Story 8. Conversations literally suck. Most people have very basic conversations, incredibly surface level. If you make one statement, it becomes generalized into who you are, rather than a reflection of being one part of a complex being. Story 9. Smart people are full of doubts. Stupid people are usually quite self-assured and unwilling to learn. Story 10. You actually realize that you don't know everything, and you get irritated by people who think they do, especially since they are usually almost impressively stupid. Story 11. I find it really hard when other people don't question things as deeply as I do, or they seem happy with a basic answer, or they give a basic solution. Is no one actually interested in the why and how behind it all? Story 12. You tend to either overestimate your intelligence or underestimate your ignorance. Speaking from experience. Story 13. I overthink because I overanalyze absolutely everything. It means I can get into my head really easily for everything from my relationships to a darn math problem to something I do at work. It makes me question myself even when I know what I know. Story 14. You've read your history, understand it, and are doomed to watch helplessly as the hordes of marching Maroons take humankind down the same blood-soaked and lifeless road. Story 15. You can easily get ostracized for pointing out hard truths, asking tough questions, and/or suggesting tough but good solutions that most people aren't smart enough to realize. Story 16. You have to put up with some dumb people, and they don't quite understand the extent of how dumb they are, because majority rules, right? Groupthink is smart, right? Mob mentality is sensible, right? Not. I agree with other sentiment expressed here, that the more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know. Answer. Yeah, one of the things that makes stupid people so frustrating is that they don't know how stupid they are, and they'll often even think they're average or smart. This is the point where it occurs to you that most people actually don't really have very much free will at all. They're essentially just pre-programmed automatons made of meat and bone. Story 17. I had a friend who once said something that has stayed with me. I wish I hadn't been labeled as smart when I was a kid, because it made me think I'm smart and I'm special and I don't have to work to succeed. In other words, there's a strong temptation to be lazy because you can. Story 18. Nobody wants to play Trivial Pursuit or watch Jeopardy with you. You realize just how bad most people are at problem solving and decision making. If you were considered smart, high IQ, when you were young and skipped grades, were put in gifted programs, or both, you got to learn early the disdain most people have for those above the average. Story 19. It really sucks if you're intelligent and empathetic, especially when it relates to poor decisions of family and friends. Story 20. People dislike you. People will work against you. They will tell your teachers, your bosses, everyone anything they can hold against you in hopes you get held back and they go ahead. Story 21. Intelligence is linked to neuroticism. Smarter people are more prone to stress, anxiety, depression, and other mental disorders, not to mention just general feelings of inadequacy, self-doubt, and worry. Answer. Perhaps intelligence links to all the dark trade traits. Narcissism, because sometime you actually are objectively better. Machiavellianism, because you need people to act on things they don't understand. Psychopathy, because the former two make you feel bad and people call you out for it. They really are protection mechanisms against everything that comes with intelligence. You put on a show, make a shell for yourself so that your brain doesn't break itself or sabotage your relationships. Story 22. You learn that we are all just stupid and ignorant, so you learn to live with the fact you are not actually smart. But here I am answering a question on smart people, so it really is a paradox, ain't it? Oh, and the insane expectations, like, no, I know biology well, not rocket science. I'm only good at astrophysics because I have to be. Story 23. It's isolating. In most social contexts, belonging and other values trumps truth. A smart person can be ostracized for challenging the beliefs of a tribe, so they may even seek solitude or play dumb. But trading truth for peace can lead to eroding the self. It's the paradox of the seer in a world of sleepers, a Frankenstein's monster, intelligent and self-aware, but shunned for what he is. Story 24. My husband is gifted, and so is our oldest son. They're at a higher risk of tragic end and severe depression. Think about it. If you'd lost weight, were around morons or kids all day, every day, you'd be miserable. No one on your intellectual level. Story 25. 1. Overthinking can lead to anxiety and indecision. 2. Loneliness, hard to relate to others or find like-minded people. 3. High expectations, pressure from self and others. 4. Impatience, frustration with slower thinkers. 5. Mental health issues, awareness can lead to anxiety or depression. 6. Imposter syndrome, doubting your own abilities. 7. Seeming arrogant. Others may feel intimidated or resentful. 8. Perfectionism, fear of failure or delay in action. 9. Hard to ask for help, prefer solving things alone. 10. Questioning norms can cause conflict with authority or tradition. Story 26. Getting easily frustrated when other people can't figure out simple daily tasks like self-checkouts or simple airplane boarding instructions. Story 27. Depression, and you realize just how few actually use logic in conversation, and that gets isolating. You realize how many issues in politics, especially in human rights, are really just black and white. But politicians give them a scary narrative to sow division, to get more loyal supporters that make irrational acts out of fear. I don't feel like you'd need to be that smart to see all that, and I hope you all prove me right. I don't claim to be smart, just scholarly and an information hoarder. Story 28. Like it's been repeatedly mentioned in this thread, it can be lonely. You often adjust to others when socializing because you still crave connection. Dating, while being neurotypical and falling into this category, has its own challenges. My best relationships have been with those with ASD and are high-functioning, but there are always communication disconnects resulting from a mismatch in how our minds work. Story 29. I'm surrounded by people who are somehow more stupid than me. Despite this, I still think I am stupid too. Story 30. Sometimes people who are highly qualified in one field will assume they are smart at everything and end up doing something stupid extremely confidently. That's a good way to earn a Darwin Award. That could be a drawback. Story 31. Correcting people annoys them, so it's always a mental struggle to allow misinformation to exist versus pissing people off as a know-it-all. Story 32. I love how everyone replying to this, including myself, is likely an idiot thinking that they are the smart person being addressed. Story 33. Being smart is such a vast blanket term that absolutely means nothing. You can have academic intelligence, critical thinking skills, emotional intelligence, etc. I'm going to assume you mean smart as both academically and critical thinking. For their negatives, being book-smart intelligence has its trade-offs, as they can often lack a more realistic approach to a situation that has more deep roots, like the Palestine and Israel war. For critical thinking, the negative could be something like lacking book-smart intelligence, like being able to memorize facts that make it easier to critical think. Both are great intelligences to have, but also have their negatives. Story 34. I don't know. Honestly, aside from studies quoted elsewhere, this is a really tough question. You would need to establish whether the struggles are actually due to whatever intelligence you're claiming to have, rather than caused by a deficiency in another area. Then you would need to know what it's like to not have that intelligence. The archetypal computer dweeb who thinks that the jocks are stupid struggles due to a failure to intelligently navigate interpersonal relationships rather than an excess of logical problem-solving intelligence. Story 35. Back in the day, mental illness or chemical imbalances were swept under the rug if wasn't seen as an extreme case. When you're young and you make the grades, all things deemed quirky get overlooked. And by the time you, as an adult, understand that something may be wrong, you have already learned how to get along in society. I thank God that there are now many resources available, and people are encouraged to get themselves and their kids tested without the stigma and shame. Story 36. The isolation. As you get smarter, you remove yourself from annoying things that piss you off for their inefficiency. Imagine existing in the movie Idiocracy, where everyone has a significantly lower IQ. That's that it feels like to be smart, waiting for other people to catch up to what you do effortlessly. Knowing the solutions, but people sitting around the table debating if nailing a shoe to the wall might fix their problem. Now, that's not to say humility isn't important or that patience isn't its own virtue, but imagine spending your whole life waiting for people to catch up, and God forbid you bring it up and get told you're a narcissist. You want to just remove yourself from the equation of everyone else and do things at your own pace, even if it is terribly lonely. Story 37. Stupid people annoy the fudge out of you, especially when you realize that they can vote and procreate. Story 38. This can cause a lot of trouble. I would actually argue that it is not an advantage in any way. The biggest problem is social. One way to think of it is that it is as hard to have a IQ 30 points over the average as it is to have an IQ 30 points under the average. You are not on the same page as everyone else. It can be difficult to find people where you click and have a common understanding. Another negative is career. You might think that smart people would do well for themselves, but they most likely never had to make an effort in school or at work to do as good as others. So many smart people never learn to work hard. Many high IQ individuals don't have ambitious jobs or even make anything out of themselves. Last thing is cleverness. You might think smart people would be good at figuring out stuff. At least, problem is that they see a much higher degree of complexity in everything, which complicates the world quite a bit. There is also no guarantee that you will even be better at basic deduction, since it is based on what the person have read and what they know. High IQ is like RAM on a computer. If you don't put the right data on the hard disk, it just allows you to get to the wrong answer really fast. Story 39. Unreasonable expectations to conquer the world since you can remember. Never really learning how to study until you're in college or later because you didn't need to before. More difficult time failure because you were groomed early in life to be the smartest, most perfect one in the room. Higher anxiety disorders in adulthood. Story 40. You know exactly what needs to be done in any given situation, but sometimes due to life circumstances, you can't make the changes you see that need to be made. That's incredibly frustrating. Then there's the chronic isolation. You're often the only one that sees the entire picture, and when you point it out, you get looked at like you grew a third head. People want easy surface-level answers and solutions, and when the inevitable happens and it backfires, they bond over fixing a mistake that could have been prevented earlier. Your brain never shuts up. It's analysis, counter-analysis, meta-analysis. Then revisiting a conversation from 6 years ago to relitigate what you should have said. Smart haunted. People think you're a jerk when you're not trying to be one. Correct someone gently. You're a know-it-all. Use nuance. You're pretentious. Say nothing. You're aloof. You're either dimming yourself to be liked or being misunderstood, and that exhausting as fudge. It sucks having to constantly try to filter yourself to be understood by someone with the mental capacity of a toddler, especially when that toddler is your boss or co-worker. Existential burnout is real. You understand why you're unhappy. You can pinpoint the origin of your self-sabotage with amazing accuracy. No therapist needed. You trace your trauma patterns and intellectualize your way out of everything except feeling better. Smart doesn't mean healed. Being smart is like having a Bugatti for a brain, but the ECU in the Bugatti glitches out randomly and only gives out 30 power output because it thinks something's wrong when nothing is. You understand people, but they don't understand you. You can decode their fears, motives, patterns. But when you try to explain yourself, you'd have better luck explaining quantum computing to a hamster before someone else gets you. And of course, if you're smart people think you're bound for success. But in a lot of smart people, there's also a rebellion to not be successful when you're deemed to be successful by others, because by nature you like proving people wrong. So you self-destruct just to show the world they were wrong about you, even though deep down you know they're right if you weren't wired to be a contrarian. Anyway, being smart is great because of the perspective it gives you, and having that kind of mental firepower makes life really easy when you need it to. But there's a huge cost to pay in terms of your sanity. Lastly, alcoholism is a likely crutch because it lets your brain slow down enough to get on a normal person's level. So, yeah. If you're smart, enjoy your high-functioning brain and try not to get too depressed or drink too much along the way. Story 41. Knowing the difference between smart and intelligent. A high IQ does not make you smart, nor do you need a high IQ to be smart. Actual really smart people thrive in this world because they know how to apply their intelligence in the right way. Smart enough to be extremely socially adept and charismatic, to get people to listen to them, to be liked and have people want to do stuff for you because they like you. Smart enough to learn from mistakes and use the gained knowledge in different aspects of their life. Y'all gifted people over here whining that being smart is a curse. No, you guys aren't smart. You might be intelligent for sure, but you think you got the whole world figured out, like you're the only one who's right because you're supposed to be intelligent. Wrong. Might be intelligent, but you're not smart. Totally different things. Story 42. You ever try to pick up chicks talking about the socio-economical disadvantage that women find themselves in on the daily? Being quite smart is isolating, and you're inevitably labeled arrogant. Small talk to me is talking about the levers of power that this administration has learned to manipulate and the ineffectiveness of efforts to curtail it, and why. You can't scream that conversation at one another in a nightclub for sure. My own family thinks I'm alien. I really like hearing how you think about things. It's so different. I wrote English 101 papers on progressive taxes and the pros cons of a flat tax. The assignment: write about something you're interested in. I mean, clearly I'm not situationally smart. And I think that's the real truth. We're smart in some ways, but not in all ways. There are a lot of types of intelligence, and being quite smart is only one type of intelligence. So the negatives I experience are just strengths for other people that make them interesting to me. It makes me realize that we're all in this together, and it takes all kinds. Yeah, that's a negative. Story 43. I have an IQ of over 150, been tested several times from 12 to 18. Yo, it's a pretty uncommon range. You're not just smart, you're considered genuine by these tests. My life is absolute hell. Nobody really understands me. I dislike laws from the deepest parts of my soul because they are applied to the mass, and the mass is stupid as it can be. I wasn't academically that smart, and I feel more of a handicapped person rather than a smart, genuine guy. It's really a shame to have such a gifted brain that's rotting because I couldn't grow in the right environment. I'm still young, only 28, but I feel like I messed up somewhere in the path of life, that I can really deliver something for the whole world, but I'm too broke for that, LOL. Also, I dislike politics. Bunch of idiots seeking power and money. Story 44. When RBG died in 2020, I was sad. I knew the Republicans were going to replace her, and I felt that they would overhaul everything. People did not understand why I was sad. And then in 2022, Roe v. Wade was overturned, and then people became sad. But I was sad for 2 years. Story 45. I'm on the smarter end of the spectrum, so as a youth, I was exposed to smart kids, significantly smarter than myself. They were bored and got themselves into trouble by college. A few of them, anyway. Other ones got depressed. I went to a Mensa meeting or two last year, and the people were extremely nice and welcoming, even though I didn't fit the vibe. The men were slightly awkward conversationalists, though, honestly. I wouldn't say they lacked social skills, but the second I couldn't follow the science or Star Trek references they were talking about, they seemed disappointed. It's got to be frustrating just operating on this whole other level. I had a logic professor in college who was also my advisor. I used to tutor for his class. I would go to his office for advice, and he would just talk to me about 80s movies or something. I don't know if he just wasn't concerned about my future or what, but long story short, smart people are difficult to understand. Story 46. At early ages, you get used to being good at things without working for them. Later, you reach the point where just talent is not enough, but you are a lazy, spoiled person without patience and skill to work hard to learn things. Story 47. I'm not quite smart in most fields, but I definitely am in my own specific career fields of business and tech. As my knowledge, experience, and skills have grown, I get increasingly more frustrated with things aren't running perfectly. I can tell when I'm getting the runaround from other teams, and it drives me nuts. I'll have directors breathing down my neck to finish something, or get an answer ASAP, while some other BI or tech person claims it'll take them a week to turn around something that I know can be done in less than 30 minutes. Then they often hide behind corporate red tape. I also see people getting paid over $100K more than I make to do their jobs terribly. Failing upward is definitely a phenomenon. It's not the norm, but it's frustrating when you encounter it and can see through it. The more experience you have, the more you know how to do. You can see through much more of the issues, unfairness, and excessive bureaucracy. Story 48. I don't consider myself smart. I have a great deal of common sense. I am a good listener and practical reasoning. I'm also an introvert. My social awareness is high. While others tend to talk a lot, mostly about themselves, I just stay in the background and observe. In my 66 years on this earth, I can honestly say there are very few people that strike me as smart. Story 49. Having to dumb it down much of the time, it kind of feels like having to keep pace with someone using a walker or getting stuck behind a semi on the interstate. Story 50. Alcoholism is a common trait. I think it stems from trying to shut off the mind. Many incredibly intelligent people I have known have not struggled with it, but are by definition alcoholics. Story 51. Looks around.